Hi, everyone, and welcome again to Social Media Made Simple. And today I'm joined straight from New York. Garret Caudle is the founder and CEO of Influent, and it's a top LinkedIn agency that helps B2B companies build impact with social media strategies, and especially specializing, especially focusing on managing the social media for executives. So, Garret, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited for the conversation. It's going to be fun.
It is going to be fun for sure. So, what intrigued me when I looked at your profile is that you studied philosophy. So, from philosophy to helping executives with their finding their marketing voice, that's quite an unusual journey. So, could you tell us more about how you decided that's your thing, that's your niche?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it is kind of funny. My background, I don't think, is the typical marketer's background. When I went to school, I was really just trying to find something that would keep me interested. I, would, major in these different things, and I would be interested for a little bit, and then I would quickly lose interest. And I found that the more and more and more I studied, the more I found out that I just wanted to sit in a room and talk about big ideas. That was it. I was a dreamer and I just wanted to use my brain. And so philosophy for me was, an opportunity for me to do just that. I mean, I could just sit in a room and talk about nonsense ideas all day. And that was really satisfying for me. Of course, the problem was, when it came graduation time, I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do with my career. And I had, philosophy professors who basically told me, listen, this is like a vow of poverty, right? Like being a philosophy professor means you're teaching ethiks 101 to freshmen who don't care.
Cave and just
Oh my, yeah. It was, it was a hard thing for me to realize, which was that I was about to live the rest of my life, and if I wanted any material success at all, I needed to probably go beyond academia. So I moved to Seattle and was bartending for a bit, trying to figure out what the heck to do with the rest of my life. And I eventually, applied for a B2B marketing role simply because I needed something. And, my skills in writing and critical thinking and were, it seemed to be that I could be a good marketer, but I didn't really know. And so I remember staying up all night for this interview, preparing a presentation, and basically went into it thinking, I have to get this. I have to get this. I have to get it. And somehow, for some reason, they took a chance on me and said, you know what, we'll bring this kid in who has no experience in B2B marketing, and let's see how he can do. And it was great, because the reality is what happened is I approached B2B marketing completely different because I had no formal training. So rather than immediately going and, writing blog posts and case studies and doing all the things that maybe B2B marketers usually do, I kind of took a different approach. I took a huge interest in the founder of that agency that I got hired at. His name was John Giorso. His name is John Giorso. And John and I and my boss at the time, Kashif, we worked together, and we found out that basically the better approach to this was that we just, do thought leadership. Let's go into the market and make sure that Orca Pacific, the company I was working for, was seen as the foremost expert in e-commerce. And I felt like the best way to do that was to turn our CEO John into a e-commerce expert on LinkedIn. So that's what we did. And in the first year, we drove a ton of success through LinkedIn, enough so that John basically built a team underneath me and said, all right, you go and see what you can really do with this thing. And that's what I did. And for a couple of years, I was able to build this thing up, was able to, do this thought leadership strategy across a couple different executives at the company. Eventually, the company grew from 20 people to 40, from 40 to 60, 60 to 80. And then I got to see it through a huge acquisition to a big global agency called Media Monks. At that point, I got to work on, thought leadership strategies across the global organization. And it was like, all right, this thing has legs. This thing can be something. And so I left Seattle, moved to New York City, and decided I wanted to launch my own agency around this exact idea, helping, founders, become thought leaders. So that's what I did. And it's been a fun journey because it's been a whirlwind from not knowing a lick about B2B marketing to owning my own B2B marketing agency and now having a ton of success. We're At the time of this recording, we're 10 full-time folks, and we're growing extremely quickly, adding on a new headcount every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. And it's a very interesting avenue to take because I guess people look for inspiration and they look for personalities. So working with thought leadership seems to be, the most logical thing to do. But I can imagine it's also, like a full-time job. And in your case, you even mentioned like it's a job for a full team. And I can imagine with big personalities come also big challenges. So could you talk a little bit about how is it working in this field, and what challenges there are comparing to like ordinary marketing?
Sure. Yeah, it's a different beast, and for a lot of reasons.
And I think beast here is a good
Yeah, beast is the right word here. So this can be a really difficult strategy, thought leadership, I mean. And for a couple different reasons. The first is that obviously you're dealing with executive personalities. Part of what makes the strategy so effective is that you're using the authenticity of a person to help, bring expertise to the market. Of course, the other side of that coin is that people have their own idiosyncrasies and have their own, what makes them who they are. And finding a way to master that voice is both a really tedious process and can be difficult in the context of working with that person, because that person, that executive, has to trust you to be able to, to find their voice and to represent them and to capture what it is that makes them special. They have to trust you to write for them. And that can be really difficult. So that's a huge difficulty of this. The other part that's really difficult is that this social media game, it's an attention economy, which means that you are getting real-time feedback that, hey, all that effort you put into those posts, it's for nothing because you didn't get a whole lot of traction. And guess what? You're back to the drawing board. And so if you ask any influencer, be that in the B2C world or in this B2B world, how they feel about, the social media game, they'll tell you it is exhausting because you are constantly working against an algorithm to try to gain traction and attention. And it can be long hours and tiring and exhausting. And so the reality is that, navigating both of these challenges requires full-time attention. It can't be done just by like, oh, somebody will do this on our team, an intern or this or that. It simply is too difficult. And if you want to do it well and consistently, you have to give it the attention it needs, which means full-time work on it, basically.
Yeah. And I can also imagine that developing a strategy for an executive can be much harder than people realize, because there is this component of I'm trying to put myself in the shoes, I'm CEO in a couple of years, and then I will have to give up that control and really trust someone. That's a big leap of faith, and also an additional, because if you're developing a strategy for a brand, the brand will not come back to you and say like, oh, this is not me, because you're basically deciding what is the brand, right? So how do you approach building that strategy from scratch? Because I guess there's no blueprint for that, and I can imagine also it's very individual, case by case scenario.
It is. Yeah, it's a good question. I empathize with, as difficult as they can be, I empathize with founders and CEOs. I am one. I get it. Marketers haven't been trained on how to do this. And so there have been a lot of CEOs who have been, burned by trying to trust their team or trying to trust this random ghostwriter they found that's going to help them. And then it doesn't go well and they're frustrated and they just want help getting, authentic content out the door, but it's a time-consuming process for them. And it's because the people who they're tapping into for help just don't have experience doing this. This is a very, it's its own strategy, and you have to have the experience and the processes in place to help facilitate an authentic content strategy. And if you don't have those things, it's going to create a frustrating situation. And so the best way to handle this is essentially having people running the strategy who are journalists, who understand how to actually pull a story out of somebody, who are trained writers, not just people who are good at writing, but people who are, do writing for a living. It's having people processes on the team or on the in the process of creating the content that set aside time to explore what does make this person's perspectives unique, what is different about the way they deliver their message, what is special about them and their story that's different from other people, and how does that overlap with the brand? And all of these things require time, attention, and that's what people get wrong is they skip those steps, they don't resource it the right way, and then they end up in a frustrated situation.
Yeah. And then I think another challenge comes in because you want to keep it authentic, but then you still want to, it's for a purpose. It's supposed to serve the brand. So what's your take on how to balance out the personal brand with the company's overall brand? And do you have some best practices how to, walk this fine line?
Yeah, I was talking with someone about this the other day, a client, and the analogy that came to my mind was like a chef. If you are a chef, people come to your restaurant to eat great food. And if you say that you serve a hamburger on the menu, if people order that hamburger, they're expecting a hamburger, and it needs to taste great, and it needs to look and taste like what a hamburger is supposed to look and taste like. Now, there's still room for style, but the reality is that you have to first make sure you deliver the hamburger the way it needs to be, that people enjoy it, that the flavor's good, and then you can make it your own. Then you can add in the special, thing on the top and the interesting thing, and you can plate it the way you want. And so that's how I think about content is you need to make sure that you are providing value, that you are giving people the education and, inspiration maybe a little, but mostly education is the real thrust of what most LinkedIn content should be. And so you need to dial in that part. And then what you can do is you can add on some of the, unique stuff into how you deliver it. Maybe there's a certain way of writing that, suits you best, or maybe there is a part of your story as a CEO that really suits itself to helping tell or helping deliver some of this value. And maybe that gets weaved in, or maybe there's a few, pictures or things you use to show you out there living your life while also delivering this education. And so I would encourage people to think about things in this way. You have to deliver value, and that's the most important thing. And then treat your authenticity as like the special plating, the way to, design it, the special approach.
Yeah. So in this beautiful authentic sauce on the burger, what type of content do you find most effective for executives on LinkedIn? Are there any specific formats or topics that you found that resonated the most with the audience, considering what you told earlier, that no matter what it is, it still needs to serve the purpose? But is there, a golden format?
Definitely. Yeah. It's funny. In the world of LinkedIn, there are thousands of, LinkedIn consultants and people who want to tell you about the algorithm and all the things you need to do and post at this time and these formats and this, all of these things, typically the people who pay the most attention to these things are actually the ones who are getting the least success, ironically. The reality is that whatever content is going to earn you the attention of your ideal customer by delivering the most value in a unique way that stands out, that's the content that's going to work. And for some people, it looks some way, and for other people, it looks another way. So I try not to put a ceiling on what content can be. I've seen people have extremely great success with short form video. I've seen people have great success with long form video. I've seen people do written content only. I've seen people do slides and carousels. I've seen people do, interviews with tons of people, and I've seen people just do it themselves. And so I don't think there's one way. I think it's more about finding the way that best suits, with the message you're trying to deliver. Now, that said, I do think that there are some best practices that people should be paying attention to. Here's a few that I can rattle off. One is that great content doesn't bury the lead. The value you're trying to bring needs to be front and center with every post. LinkedIn is a social media platform, meaning that people are going to be scrolling, and every second somebody spends on your post is a second that you are having to earn them away from the urge to scroll. Which means your posts, no matter what they are, videos, graphics, whatever, need to be value packed and need to be tight and snackable. So that's always something that I think people should be doing. And then secondly, I think it's important that you have some variation in what you do to make sure that people understand that you're not just publishing stuff to publish stuff, that there's some variation, authenticity, that it's a real person behind the keyboard. There's a picture of you here maybe, and maybe there is a graphic here and there. If it's just the same thing every single day, you're going to wear people out. There's going to be fatigue. People are going to stop trusting that it's authentic. So those are some two best practices. But other than that, it is case by case, and it's about figuring out what works for you in your voice.
Yeah. And how about direct engagements and interactions? Because that's also another layer. Your content is out, but can you share some tips how, for an executive profile, what is the best way to engage with the audience you're reaching?
Yeah. So, a lot of people, when they think about, I was talking earlier about you don't want people to feel like it's just this publishing machine where every day it's just boom, 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 and there's no variation, there's no voice. Part of the reason that's an issue is because in order to grow a community, LinkedIn is a community-based platform, right? And that's the best way to think about it. It's better not to think of it like a TikTok. It's not just you post something and you hope that the right people see it. You post something and your immediate connections are going to see it. It's a community you're building. And if that's the case, it can't be a one-sided conversation all the time. You need to be out in your community and, contributing to other people's points and, being involved and seeing what other people, your peers, are posting, what your customers are posting. And so that requires being, thoughtful with your replies on the comments. That means you need to be, liking other people's content and, connecting with other people. You can't just be in your little bubble. So that's how I would, tell, people, executives or people who are managing executive profiles, if you work on the profile to create content, you also need to work to nurture that community through engagement. Comments typically is a really good way, but you can do messages and other ways of engaging your community.
Yeah. And I guess, I've asked you about a lot of best practices, but can you think of an example when it went terribly wrong, or where you saw, of course without dropping names, but where you saw oh my God, this person need to be my client, they need me now, because this is just on a high level, not to gossip about anyone, but
I can think of a ton of examples. Let me give you just a couple. So we worked with an agency, a comms agency, years ago, and I shouldn't say years ago. It wasn't years and years, but it was a couple of years ago. And we, when we took on their account, they were posting 5 times per day, and they were treating LinkedIn like a bulletin board. Hey, here's our latest blog. Here's our latest webinar. Here's our latest this, our latest that. We're going to be here. We're going to be there. We're going to be doing this. And if you went through and looked at every one of these posts, there is just crickets. There's no engagement at all. Because the reality is that LinkedIn, as we all know, is not a bulletin board for your long form content. It's not a content repository. And so what we were able to do is we were able to come in and say, we need to completely rethink this. And we had to get them to trust us that we're actually going to cut posting in half. Or even, I think it was less than that. I was we're going to, cut posting into a 30% of what you've been doing. And you got to trust us that that's the right way to do it. And so eventually they did, and we posted, a third of what they were posting. And then we looked at the results after, 3 months, and we had increased their, likes and followers and impressions by 500%. And it's okay. So we had to educate them, less is more sometimes. Quality per post can absolutely outperform quantity. And so that's something I see all the time. And that's, an instance where it was very clear they needed some help. I'll say one more example here. We frequently work with executives who feel that they should be optimizing for the most possible likes and views they can get per post, which seems intuitive, sort of. You post something, you see it get, 150 likes and maybe like 15,000 impressions. And you think, God, I just got to do that all the time. The problem is that most of the posts that will go mini viral for you, especially when you start off, are going to be personal posts, photos of you and your kids, pictures of you and your team at an event. This is the reason these posts are doing so well, is because you're, like I said before, LinkedIn's a community-based platform. Your community is full of people who know you personally. And if those people see pictures of you and your family, they're going to click like because they think it's cute, and it is cute. And we love that. The problem is that, one, that's not helping you get in front of a net new audience, meaning there are very few people who don't know you who are going to go, oh yeah, I love this post. And then two, you are optimizing for the wrong thing. It doesn't matter if 100 people like your post if 0 of them are ideal customers. The reality is we're doing LinkedIn for a reason, right? It's not so that our existing community thinks that we're cool. It's so that we're, getting in front of a net new audience. We're building a new community of customers. And so that's what I would say is, we've had a couple clients where we've had to come in and basically tell them, we are not going to get, 150 likes per post. And you need to realize that that's okay. But if you trust us, within the first, 30 days, we'll be able to show you posts where we are getting 4 times the amount of ideal customer profile engagement, ICP engagement per post. And we're going to optimize for that. And if you do that, you're going to end up getting way, way better results in terms of business results. And you have to let go of those vanity metrics. So I think that's, maybe the second most common example of what we see and that we have to kind of work clients through.
Yeah, and I think it's easy to go down this rabbit hole, like, oh my God, because like all of a sudden, my network is not reacting anymore, but your network are not your clients. So
yes, exactly. Yeah, people need to sort of back up sometimes and think about, like, what's the real utility of what I'm doing here? I do want to show up authentic. I do want my existing network to, enjoy my content. But if I'm going to treat this as a marketing channel, I have to be okay with the idea that maybe it doesn't matter if my roommate from college or, our, old employee like the post. It probably doesn't.
Yeah, very well said. And then when it comes to high profile executives,
Yes.
handling criticism or a little bit of a crisis, I guess that can be also tricky, because then again you have this duality, it's the brand and it's the personal brand that may suffer. So how do you and it's social media, so you're gonna get negative feedback anyways. It's so how do you handle that when the time inevitably comes?
Yes. So this brings up a really good point, which is that LinkedIn and executive social media in general isn't just a marketing channel, it's a PR channel, right? In the same way that when an executive is quoted on some article in Forbes, that's a PR sort of activity. Similarly, when an executive posts on LinkedIn, there is a little bit of a sort of a PR activity happening there. And just like any PR activity, there's possibility for good press and there's possibility for bad press, right? And especially when you're working with, high profile executives, there can be a lot of concern about, like, oh man, we really don't want to be talking about this, or we do want to be talking about that. And, other than using some of the, typical channels one would use, such as like getting a lot of review from like a legal team or a compliance team. A lot of our, really big enterprise clients have these different teams that will review content to make sure that it, it fits what it needs to fit. You still need to have processes in place for how to deal with things when, let's say something isn't as well received as you'd like. I don't have a hard and fast thing here, but I do have a couple of sort of insights into how best to deal with this. The first is to remember that social media is social media, meaning that just because something is out there on social media doesn't necessarily mean that every person in the world cares about this one thing you said. And so basically what I'm trying to say here is there are certain things you should take in context, right? We have had, executives in the past where, they'll look at a certain line and they'll be like, I really don't know if this line in particular puts this in the best light. And I wonder about how somebody might think about this related to this. And it does get to be a point where it's like, okay, yes, those are all valid concerns. Social media means we have to be posting 4 or 5 times a week. If every post is hyper analyzed to the point where you're afraid to post, or everything is so polished that you're not saying really anything at all, then let's just not do this channel. There's a little bit of control you have to give up when you're doing social media. And as long as you do the checks and balances you need, then you need to embrace the idea that you can't hyper analyze everything. It's social media. It's just, it has to be quick, or otherwise don't do it. And then secondly, we have processes in place. If a post needs to be deleted, you delete the post. If this executive doesn't like the post, you don't post it. There's just some basic best practices that we use, but for the most part, this isn't actually something we see all that often. Most of our big executives that we work with, we have several teams that we have to work with to make sure the content we publish is not going to put anyone in any situation that they don't want to be in.
Yeah, which brings me actually to one question, because I guess getting approvals is not unique only to working with CEOs, and many of our clients work in bigger teams. So do you have any best practices for establishing approvals? How do you balance it between getting things done and then not building like this super lengthy approval where you wait ages to get it right?
Definitely. There's a little bit of a ramp up period with every client where there's going to be additional time spent in approval in the first month than there should be in month 2 or 3, because people are getting used to it. But the reality is that I think the only way to reduce that approval time is to build trust. And the only way to build trust is, one, to align on your why. So everyone needs to understand, why are we doing what we're doing? What's the real goal here? And make sure that everyone understands how important the actual getting content out the door is in achieving that goal. If we're all creating a logjam, then we're not getting content out the door. And if we're not getting content out the door, then we're not achieving our goal of driving new business. And if we're not achieving our goal of driving new business, what are we doing here? And I think getting everyone kind of in lockstep on the why, this isn't just some other exercise, this is a marketing strategy. And if you're in the way of getting the content out the door, you are stopping our success. So I think getting everyone aligned on that why is big. And then the trust building when it comes to actually working directly with the executive. Typically, the teams that could get in the way, the compliance and the marketing, typically those actually aren't the ones that get in the way the most. It's the executive themselves, because they're the ones who are most interested in making sure it matches their voice. And so it just requires a lot of one-on-one work with that person to really understand, give it to us candid. What do you like? What don't you like? Give us examples of posts you've written in the past that you like. Give us examples of other people that you like. How do you like to say this word or that word? We do intake forms with our executives where we basically ask them a ton of questions about their personality and the way they like to sound and who they are in their friend group, and like stuff that you would think is like hyper personal, but really allows us to, one, build trust, but two, build a better understanding of how to sound like this person. And if we nail that, which we put a lot of time and effort into doing, the approval process actually isn't too bad. It's when you miss that step, when you don't build trust with the executive, that you end up creating such a rift.
Yeah, and I guess it's fascinating because it's also almost like, sounds like building a psychological profile, but then the better you get it, the better it is. And I guess for any other content, the better you understand your brand, the better you understand the brand. If you're an agency, and the better you understand the brand you're working for, the less friction you'll get along the way.
Definitely. I mean, there's an art and a science to this, right? And the art is in understanding, what makes a human particularly interesting, right? Like we hire, like I said, journalists because we're looking for people who can talk with someone and really understand the idiosyncrasies that make that person really, really interesting and unique. And that doesn't just help the content be better, it helps the whole process of creating content for another person be better. Because if you can mirror certain parts of themselves in their content that they didn't maybe see in themselves even initially, that, I mean, it builds so much trust. It's a really incredible thing when our clients start to look at some of the content we create and they go, oh, I didn't realize somebody could create content that feels like it's coming directly from me. They didn't even think it was possible, but it is. You just have to have the right type of people who are really paying attention to you and talking with you and understanding not just what you're telling them when it comes to ideas, but how you're delivering it.
Yeah. And I cannot help myself to ask this question. So how often do you get this like, oh, I guess AI could do this? Well, not.
Definitely. You mean executives who think they could do it, or yeah,
No, like executives that they can, like I could do this with, Chat GPT. Like, why do I need, someone to do it for me?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, this is the most common objection that any agency gets is, well, why can't I just replicate this in-house? And what I like to tell people is, well, you can, but you are going to end up investing more time and more effort than you would with us, and you're going to get worse results. Like that's why we're an agency, is because we specialize in this. We have built a model and a process and technology that allows us to do this at extremely high level in an extremely efficient way. And by trying to replicate this in-house, you most of the time are going to end up in a situation where you're spending more money, you're wasting more time, and you're getting worse results. And that's just not a good deal. And so the reality is what makes this hard? Well, most executives aren't the world's best writers. A lot of executives are great writers. But does that mean that you are somebody who's so good at writing that you could do it as a full-time job? And do you want to? Do you want to be spending all this time writing, or do you want to be spending this time working on building your company? The reality is that the likelihood that there's an executive who is both the best copywriter possible, the best LinkedIn strategist — notice I say LinkedIn because LinkedIn has its own specificities — the best interviewer of themselves, right? Like that, pulling ideas out of you is a whole process. That's why it's part of our process. And like the best B2B marketer and the best video editor and the best graphic designer. Like, even if there was an executive who had all of these qualities, they still don't have the processes. They still don't have all of the data and all of the insight. So it's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to do this well, you need to invest in doing it the right way. And if you're just trying to DIY it, you're going to spin your gears and you're going to end up creating more of a headache for yourself than if you just simply go out, go get the help you need, and then, focus on building your business while someone else focuses on building your brand.
Yeah. And that's like, I'm literally making notes, but it make so much sense. And I think there's also a very human aspect to it, that even if you think you know yourself very well, there's so much added value in someone talking to you and looking at you from an external point. I see this an example, of course, like I'm not an executive, but even with stupid things like my bio, I needed to provide my bio somewhere, right? And I wrote it, and then I gave it to my colleague from the team, and I said, could you look at this? And she, redesigned it, and she wrote those amazing things that I wouldn't necessarily put in there, but then I thought, like, yeah, I'm doing all these things, and this is like an amazing bio. So putting this micro example on a macro scale, there's so much more you could get from someone looking at you.
Absolutely. I mean, why do we all, why are therapists, there's a lot of reasons why therapists are so effective, but, what is one dynamic that a therapist has with a patient that makes them so effective? It's that they're able to sort of, pull things out that maybe the person can't see themselves because they're witnessing the person. And, why do we look to to get feedback from trusted peers, from our partners, from others? Why do we call referrals? When we talk about, hiring an individual, there's something about having other people witness us that can help us educate ourselves about what we believe in and who we are. And this is a process that whether you know it or not, you're doing it, right? Like we look to other people to understand ourselves in so many ways. This is the philosopher coming out. And so I think there's a huge aspect of, if you're going to, of this that comes into LinkedIn and personal branding and content, if you're going to try to come up, with your own ideas about what, who you are and personal brand and stuff like that, you simply are going to have such a difficult time if you don't have people who can work with you, who can look at your ideas and pull them out of you and ask you questions, who can, help look at, the way you talk about yourself and try to shape a little bit of a narrative, because we are often the worst, if we have to report back about ourselves, we're often going to be the worst at that. We need other people to help us. And I think that's a huge part of this, that, if you try to do it in solitude, it's not going to work the way you want it to.
Yeah. So kind of to sum up, there's the aspect of like investing your time, then your skill, and then finally that, magic extra sprinkle of getting someone to see you from another angle. So our dear executives on LinkedIn, go and find Garret. It's worth it.
Thank you, Eliza. Yeah, it is, there's a reason that I decided to build an agency around this. And it's because I believe that to do it well, you need to have all of this expertise, this process. And I've seen so many people struggle with it and not go get the expertise and process that they need. And so I think that, it's really exciting for us because we get to really provide a lot of value to our clients. And it's exciting because we get to see our clients who are usually frustrated with their, LinkedIn profile start to realize, oh, this can be exciting. This can be a fun new channel for us to explore. This can be effective at driving new business. And so it's we're operating in a really fun niche, and we're excited to be able to continue to do it.
And that's also the thing. Like, it doesn't have to be serious; it can be fun. So going into the end of our conversation, we also have a fun thing to do. We have a round of personal questions. So what's your favorite social media platform and why?
Can you imagine if I say anything but LinkedIn? I have to say LinkedIn. So obviously it's LinkedIn for a lot of reasons. LinkedIn is, in my opinion, it's so unique in the world of social media because there's no other platform that marries your work history, your credibility with your content. I can be an anonymous user on X or on TikTok or Reddit, and I can post expertise and say, I know what I'm talking about. You should listen to me. And guess what? People do listen to you. That's why misinformation happens. But LinkedIn's unique because you have the person's entire work history attached to their profile. And so it's really easy for both LinkedIn's algorithm and for us as individuals to be able to see this is or isn't somebody who I should be listening to. And I think that's a really unique dynamic that in the world of misinformation, in the world of, inauthenticity, and it's really an AI, and it's important to have that connection between the actual person's background and their content. So I think that's one reason I really like LinkedIn. Another is that I think it's an endless place for creativity because there's so many boxes people put LinkedIn in all the time. And so it's a fun place to constantly break out of boxes. Well, you can't do that on LinkedIn. Oh, really? You can't? Okay, well, we just did it. Right? Like it's a fun sandbox to play in. And I think that's why I really like LinkedIn. My number 2 would probably be TikTok. I really enjoy TikTok as well.
Okay. Yeah. And I had this in the previous conversation too, that we mentioned that LinkedIn is a little bit like more forgiving. I don't want to say forgiving, but supportive. That's the word I was looking for. That it still seems to be the less toxic platform where people are cheering you on. And when you get a community, it's usually supportive people who are interested. So it's this like really high value, nice audience as opposed to, just random people who say, meh.
Right? Definitely. It's interesting about what that is that makes it that way, but you're exactly right. I think there might be something about this idea that, we all are on the same, we're all in the same hamster wheel. We all have jobs, we all have things we're building. some of us, work to live, some of us live to work. But at the end of the day, we all have to work. That's what we do. And so the ability to sort of come together in a space with other people who are also, working on their careers, and there's this this positive effort that everyone's putting in toward themselves. And there's a nice sort of like mutual respect that happens on the platform. Whereas some of these other platforms, they can be some of our outlets for certain things like negativity, and certain, they can be places where people have, difficulty with, standards that they see. And there's a lot of toxicity in these other platforms that I'm not going to say it's not on LinkedIn, but LinkedIn certainly provides a certain container where a lot of that toxicity doesn't necessarily live. Now, there's exceptions to that, but I think in general, LinkedIn's a really safe place for people to be able to be creative and tell their story. And, I could talk all day about different, stories I've heard from people who start posting on LinkedIn and then have incredible opportunities open the door for them. So today we've talked about CEOs posting on LinkedIn. If you are anybody, you should post on LinkedIn. It's a platform, for everyone to be able to share their, personal expertise.
And building your personal brand, because again, it will help you to stand out if you're looking for a job or for business opportunities. It will always, it's
absolutely,
it's better.
I have a friend who she likes to say, like, if the work, what does she say? I think she says, like, if you're not posting about the work you do, then you might as well have not done the work when it comes to building your career, right? Because the reality is that most people aren't going to look at your resume. They're not going to look at that line. They're not going to be able to see. So why don't, instead of you putting it as one of 45 different lines on your resume, why don't you post about it all the time, the thing you did? And that makes it, a place for people to actually see the work you're doing. And I think that's an incredible, I'm really proud of seeing all the people who are taking to LinkedIn to share their success and be able to promote themselves, because I think it's an awesome place for people to do that.
Yeah. And it's also, on the other hand, it's like this universal validation, because like you cannot lie about it. Like you post, you did something, and then you see like people say, yeah, that was amazing and I enjoyed working with you, whatever. This you cannot fake. A line on your resume, you can always say like, oh yeah, I successfully led blah blah blah, right? But this engagement, you cannot simply fake, unless you have like, very supportive friends who will, I don't know, write fake comments for you. But that, I don't think anyone would actually do.
It's true. It's true. Sharing your successes in public allows you to tell that story in a better way. And it's definitely something people should be doing.
Amazing. Is there anything you watch, listen, or read right now that you could share with our listeners?
Oh, yeah, this is good. Well, if you were to look off screen here, I have tons of books. I'm a very big reader. And there's so many things I could recommend. I think, keeping it relatively related to this conversation, I think there are certain, there's the EOS process, and a lot of people have different business management processes. There's a book called Traction, and Traction is it's a book that basically talks about different ways that you should be building your business. It's a business framework. And I would just say, for anyone who is a founder or building a business, you need a framework. You need something to give structure to all of the mess of what you're doing. Creating a company is messy. And so I would really recommend that, if you're a founder, if you're somebody who even is thinking about being an entrepreneur, read that book, take a look at it. I think it's a really good read. It's called Traction. It's really, really good.
Awesome. Amazing. And then the final question of all questions, cats or dogs?
So I grew up with cats and dogs. However, I am firmly in the dog camp by this point in my life. I have 2 dogs. I have a pug. His name's Theodore. He's sleeping off camera, luckily not snoring too loud. And then I have a blue heeler. Her name is Murphy, and she is in the other room because she is noisy and likes to chew on stuff. So I
What a combo of dogs.
Oh yeah, trust me. I mean, it's nice to have the healer keeps the pug active, and the pug keeps the healer on her toes. So it's a good thing.
That's the perfect duo.
Yeah, the perfect combo.
Garret, thank you so much for the conversation. For people seeking out your services, they can find you, I can imagine, on LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. Yeah, can you imagine if I would have been like, you can find me on YouTube? Yeah, not no. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's where you can find me. My name's Garret Caudle, and then my website as well, www.influent. That's influent.co.
Thank you so much for the amazing conversation. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. As usual, if you liked it, then subscribe and keep an eye and ear out, I guess, for upcoming episodes. And until then, as always, have a terrific time.